Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another great episode of Liam Picks Fights. Today, we're going to be doing a main event breakdown for UFC Vegas 27. It's going to be headlined by a bantamweight fight between former champion Cody Garbrandt, making a epic return, beating Raphael Assunção with a show-stopping knockout. Very impressive stuff. He is going to be taking on the very talented Rob Font. On the other side, he's coming off the strength of 3 wins in a row, including a first-round knockout over Marlon Moraes. We'll get into that fight a little bit in the breakdown, but I think that this is a great fight. It's a showcase of the stacked, talented bantamweight division in the UFC, and I think that, this is a pick'em fight, according to odds makers. I think that's relatively fair. I think that both of these guys have a lot of talent, a lot of upside, reason to believe that they can make it very far in this division. And I think that both of these guys have distinct advantages. You look on the Rob Font side, these guys are the same height, but Rob Font carries a 6-inch reach advantage into this contest. That's a really big gap. And given that they're a similar height, you can expect that Rob Font is going to be able to reach Cody with the jab when Cody is not in range to hit Rob. And so that would make you think, man, maybe there's a striking advantage on the side of Rob Font. But then you look at the innate advantages to Cody Garbrandt and you see why this matchup was made, why the UFC matchmakers picked these two guys. They match up in a very interesting way. Cody, on the other side, is a very fast, precision right hand, and he moves in and out of range well. He also has a tool that is, pretty essential in the modern MMA game to take on somebody with a proficient and a reliable jab like Rob Font, and that's that he throws calf kicks. We see in his last fight against Raphael Assunção, it was a much more measured, much more composed Cody Garbrandt, and, that's only one time that we've seen Cody be so measured and composed since the Dominic Cruz fight, and it does make you think, can we trust Cody to be that measured and composed moving forward? We don't know the answer there. But what we do know is that in his last fight, he did look measured. He did look composed. He did walk Raphael Assunção, who's a clever striker, onto strikes. He made him miss a lot. He was hitting him with calf kicks that really seemed to change the complexion of the fight, that made Assunção want to come forward. And I've seen other analysts note it this week, but I noted this myself in the tape study as well. At the end of the first round, Cody Garbrandt is ducking, moving, faking, feinting, and using ducks and head fakes to get Assunção to flurry and miss. And I think that was a setup. We see at the end of round 2, he starts to initiate the same process, and you see Assunção, now he's a little more hesitant to throw. He's thinking, what should I do? How should I react? Last time, he made me look bad here. He made me miss. Is he going to try and duck his head again? He's thinking, overthinking, you might argue, about what is coming next. And that's when Cody has the ability to just disguise that right hand, come up top with it, and close the show. So I think that Cody is a very skilled guy. I think that his heart, basically, he lets his emotions do the thinking in his cage fights sometimes, and that's not a good idea. I think that in the TJ Dillashaw fights, we saw that Dillashaw was the more adaptable fighter. He got stunned early in the first fight. He was able to come back, and he was able to make the requisite adjustments to win the rematch as well. Cody had an opportunity to get back in there with Dillashaw, and he wasn't able to figure out the code there, and that was a former training partner. So we have seen Cody stifled before, but we have to remember Cody's a pretty young man, and he's the younger guy in this matchup. So again, we've got an advantage inherently on the side of Garbrandt. It's about a 3 or 4 year age advantage. I want to say that Rob Font is 33 years of age, Cody's 29. And so we've got guys at a little bit at different points in their career, If you look, they have common opponents. The Pedro Munoz loss is one that they've both suffered, and I think that Cody actually fared much better in the Pedro Munoz fight, which gives me some pause when I see a lot of people backing Rob Font confidently here. I think that Cody was making a value judgment of sorts, that his leg was getting picked apart by kicks and that he needed to try and take Pedro out. Was it the smartest calculation? Arguably it wasn't. It ended up getting him taken out ultimately with strikes, and in a similar fashion to how he lost the Dillashaw fights. But it was a lot different in that Pedro just walked through some hammers from Cody and beat him up with those calf kicks badly and compromised Cody to the point where Cody had to make a do or die, a fight or flight, a quit or try and go out in a blaze of glory and win the fight type decision. And he went out in a blaze of, punches, and it didn't go his way. Pedro's a really big hitter. But if you watch the Rob Font fight with Pedro Munoz, Pedro walks him down, calf kicks him, doesn't really respect much of what's being thrown back, and then finishes Rob with punches fast, and granted, he ended up getting a guillotine choke. Rob was trying to stay in the fight, trying to react properly, ends up shooting himself into a guillotine against probably arguably the biggest guillotine threat in the division. So it was Rob Font. I don't think Rob Font was making a low IQ decision there. I think he was badly hurt and rocked, and so he was just fighting on instincts at that point. And so when people talk about the durability of Rob Font, sure, he's a fairly durable fighter, but he has been rocked in a lot of his performances. I would argue he was rocked in the Ricky Simone fight. I would argue that he was also rocked, in the Lineker fight. And so you see that Rob Font is not immune to being hit with shots. He just hasn't been finished, TKO'd, knocked out in the UFC or in his pro MMA career. However, he is 33 years of age, guys, and he is just now moving towards the elite levels of the division once again. He beat Marlon Moraes last time out, but I feel like that was a washed Marlon, guys, and I mean to say that in the sense that Marlon had just taken a brutal beating, a knockout loss, an embarrassing one at the hands of Corey Sandhagen. He wanted to jump right back in there, and that was a mistake. And he jumped back in there with Rob Font. He was responding poorly to punches the whole time. Marlon, who made his bread and butter, striking, knocking people out in the UFC, hurting them and submitting them when they were hurt. He started trying to wrestle, seemed to fatigue himself a bit, and got badly outstruck and was reacting very poorly to the punches. But he didn't react great against Corey Sandhagen, and, he hasn't really reacted great in a fight since the Henry Cejudo fight. And so I think that there's reason to believe that Marlon Moraes isn't necessarily the same guy, and so Rob Font caught him at the right time. He beat up on Sergio Pettis, who was a 125-pounder that was just coming up for the first time for that fight in the UFC, as far as I remember. And I watched that fight back and was surprised to see how often Sergio was landing big head kicks. Sergio was landing the right hand pretty consistently throughout that fight. Straight punches, right down the middle, right hand. I think that this matchup, if we're to look in hindsight and see somebody as a glaring favorite and not via a decisive knockout early, I think it might be looking at Cody Garbrandt has been able to, take somebody like Dominic Cruz to school, take him on a tour around the octagon. He's made a lot of guys miss very badly, and I do have this inkling in the back of my mind that if Rob Font starts to get stung by counters early and starts to retreat, this could be another Cody reminder of what he's capable of. And I'm not saying that, Cody's a lock to win this fight or anything, but I do think he has fight-changing power. I think that his wrestling game is probably somewhat underrated because it's so infrequently seen, but he has opportunistic takedowns when he wants them. Granted, does he want to do that in a fight against Rob Font, who's demonstrated some skills and abilities on the ground? He's played an interesting guard game. But the fight that I'm worried this will look like is Calvin Kattar and Max Holloway. Not that Cody Garbrandt is the big volume guy, but just in the willingness to absorb damage and to eat hard shots. I feel like the New England cartel fighters, they're very good on offense. They're very talented fighters. They're tough, hard-nosed guys, and they will stay in the pocket and keep fighting. But I also think that, you become reticent to throw if you're getting countered hard, if you're getting put off your shots. And I think that they're offensive dynamos. I think that when they're forced to be on the back foot on defense, Calvin Kattar, again, a very talented striker, same gym, gets put on the back foot sometimes, gets picked apart with those calf kicks sometimes. And these guys work off their jab. A lot of their game flows off their ability to jab their opponent, to make them uncomfortable, to force their opponent to come in and eat, their power shots. And I think that if he's having a hard time landing the jab, he's talked about frustrating Cody. I think Rob might get frustrated if he's unable to land the jab. But enough jibber jabbering from me. You guys want to pick. And so ultimately, I'm going to side ever so slightly with Cody Garbrandt in this spot. This is not a fight that I'm going to be taking a bet on. I'm not going to back a money line wager on either side of this fight. That's what I should say. I'm not going to take a side in this fight. I think that it's a very close fight. I think that we see somebody go down. I think that we're going to see pretty heavy punching exchanges early. And I think that Cody is going to be trying to skirt around the outside of the octagon, land impactful leg kicks, not allow, the tone, the rhythm that Rob Font wants off that jab. I think that Cody's going to do everything in his power to deny that with calf kicks, and I think that he might be able to do that. I think that if he's not able to do that, Cody's going to end up going out on his shield, getting frustrated by the jab and trying to get his way into range. I think that he is a stubborn fighter at the end of the day. And so if Cody's not having success, I do think he's going to try and do everything he can, unload the tank, and try and win the fight. I could be wrong about that, but that's how I feel. And so my play on this fight was to pass on the sides, to look at some of the prop bets, some of the totals. I didn't see anything on the prop market that excited me too much. I'll take a look back at the market closer to fight time and see what is available. But I did take a little bit of action on this fight. 1.75 units on the fight does not start round 4 at minus 175. I saw the under 3.5, right? So 2.5 less minutes of coverage was available. Same site for minus 190. I saw that I could get a slight edge if I took the fight doesn't start round 4. And I think that there's a very good chance, Cody Garbrandt fights typically end in the first 2 rounds. But broadly, I think that 2 guys here to strike, here to throw down, very powerful guys, going to be, a size advantage in terms of the Rob Font side, and there's going to be a speed and potentially a power advantage on the Cody Garbrandt side. So I think somebody's going to get finished. Somebody's game plan is going to work out and come to fruition. And in this bantamweight division, it just seems to be killer after killer. And these guys are getting a lot of finishes, even at the elite level. These guys come to put it on the line. They're scrappers. And I expect a blood and guts war. I think it's going to be a great stand-up battle. I think both these guys are worthy contenders. I think we're going to learn a lot about both guys and where they stand in the division. And I'm very excited to see it. So this has been Liam Picks Fights main event breakdown for UFC Vegas 27, headlined by Rob Font and Cody Garbrandt. Stay tuned. I'm going to have more fight breakdowns coming for you. I also have been looking into Yan Xiaonan and Carla Esparza, Jack Hermanson, Edmund Shabazian. So stay tuned. Look forward to those breakdowns. Going to be a lot of great content on the way. Thank you.